So why don't you tell us about
Okay.
egalitarianism?
Okay, so the egalitarian position is very, very suspicious of something like separate but equal. And you know what? I got to say, yes.
Yeah.
If you hear separate but equal, you probably should be suspicious, right? Because it doesn't have a good track record.
It's weird to me when the nation gets it right before the church does.
So they're saying, wait, hold on. This is kind of like George Orwell's Animal Farm.
Yeah.
Everybody's equal, but some people are more equal
Yeah.
than others, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, I get it. And so the egalitarians are saying, no. On the one hand, with respect to creation, right? In creation, you're not only seeing an equality of value and nature, but you're seeing an equality of roles and an equality of participation in the creation duties and ministries. And so what sin is causing is actually a distorted hierarchy. And so to perpetuate or to continue that hierarchy under the guise of redemption of Christ is to mistaken that.
Yeah.
And so any structure or any interpretation that would maintain a hierarchy, it's also called hierarchicalism or patriarchalism, is wrong. It's sinful, right? And so I've heard different interpretations, because then the question becomes, all right, cool, but like, what are you going to do with Paul then? Because he seems to be pretty clear when he says things, again, man is the head of woman, just as Christ is the head of the church. Or in 1 Timothy 2, he's going to say some wild things like, I do not permit the woman to teach. She should be silent. So like, what do you do with those passages? So, I mean, I've heard a few things. On the one hand, I've heard Scott McKnight is a big guy. He's, you know, pretty well-known theologian who's going to talk about this issue. And he'll appeal to cultural or contextual reasons, how we should understand the limitations of that command as a description of that time, but not a universal prescription of how it should be. So like, there's reasons why women wouldn't be able to teach, the access they wouldn't have, or the resources they wouldn't have that would make it not doable for them, but that would make it doable for a woman to teach today. Another compelling thing that I've heard about egalitarianism in the face of those passages is, wait, hold on. So you want to pick and choose when you take Paul literally, but nobody's wearing headscarves. And so that's pretty interesting too, right? Because in 1 Corinthians, he's going to get
He's
into
also appealing to nature with the headscarf.
Exactly.
Stuff,
He's well, because of the angels and because of nature. So wear a headscarf. Nobody does that.
No.
So
we do not.
If you pick and choose where you're going to take interpretation culturally, or no, this is universal, then I see the suspicion as well. And so the overall argument for egalitarianism is that no, it's not only equality in nature and essence, but it's also equality in roles. And so here's a question I want to ask you about egalitarianism, and the one that seems most important to me. What role do you think social progressivism or social values and trends play in swaying the Christian interpretation
so
towards egalitarianism?
And I think this is probably the key driving question, right? Because for me, the arrival at egalitarianism was not one that came out of social progressivism, but one that came out of exegetical convictions there. It's just...
That's fair.
But what I think, and what that means basically is, like, I didn't feel pressure from culture to be like super pro women. That's not like... whatever. It wasn't my thing there, right? For me, it came out of how I read Genesis 1 and Ephesians 5 in particular. And probably Romans 16 is the most important passage to me in Scripture on this specific topic. But I think the role that social progressivism is one that kind of casts a looming shadow, right? Because especially in the church, there is this real either embracing of or repellent from the idea of wokeism, right? And this idea of like,
and
we have to, and we have to embrace every social change that's happening in society. It's like, look, the whole point of being a follower of Christ is that people are going to look at you weird. They called us cannibals in the first 3 centuries, right? Because they said that we ate babies.
Eucharist.
And so it's like, we've always been kind of weird with that. And so if you're not being kind of strange or seen as a little bit sus by society, then like you're probably a little bit missing out on some of that stuff.
All right.
But I think it plays a tremendous revelation in recognizing and understanding that when we live in the world that we live in, right? Romans 12 being in the world but not of the world, we are constantly managing our expectations and our understandings and our biases through the world in which we live in. And this is the tension that postmodernism has taught us, I think correctly, is that like we can't always identify our biases. There's no way to completely remove ourselves out of our cultural context and point to like some capital T universal truth that applies to any and every person and be like, found it. There it is, right? Like, I'm always going to see things through the perspective of a white dude. And it's like, that's just my bag and that's who I am and that's what it's always going to be. And so there's going to be some good things that come with that and some not
limitations.
Like, yeah, well, just like imperialist kind of things that can roll with that sometimes that are not good, right? And so
for the throat there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is just kind of is what it is. And so recognizing that though, it's not a good thing, by the way. Let me be very clear for the audience. But recognizing that, right, is the thing that puts us in the ability to say, truth is progressive on some nature, right? And we see this in the theology of accommodation that exists all throughout the meta-narrative of Scripture, right? And so it's like God never intended for there to be divorce there, but that was something that Moses allowed because the hearts of men were hardened and those kinds of things. And so it's like the idea here is God is working through whatever system that works for human beings at the time because that's how God chose to reveal God's self to us there. Yeah. And so as we grow in faithfulness and as we continue to, nurture that idea there, God is able to reveal more. And so as we just like we understand now that, men don't carry the entire totality of life in semen and women are just like the oven that bakes the baby there, but it takes both, They're like, we have better understandings of the role that women can play in leadership. Like, women are trustworthy. We don't need two of them to equal one man's say in court. It's like, and so those things change as we get better. Okay. There, as a church, as society, as human beings. And so this might be an example of one of those things.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So I gotta say, for me, like I said, the social cost of it is the heaviest for me to bear, right? Because I want to say, yes, believe women when they are raising up their voice against abuse. Yes, I want to say that. I want to empower people, women in particular, to feel like they do not need to be hidden or repressed of abuse. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's very hard for me to say that and say, yes, support women and Me Too and all these kinds of things, and at the same time say, and I'm a soft complementarian. Like, that's a really, really hard place for me to be at. Yeah. Right? And so I think part of what you're suggesting is that being able to recognize that tension, I think that sets me up to be able to grow. I hope.
Yeah, I mean, naturally.
Yeah. And that I can hopefully continue to work through that tension and continue to, see some of these
You just got to keep exegeting.
It'll
come out. It'll come.
Awesome.